Jodie Comer, Matt Damon, and Adam Driver feature as three persons who changed the course of French history in the last duel. The movie is based on the true story of the last legally permitted duel in France. The film's narrative lays out the groundwork for what would be the final fight in French history, although there are always gaps between reality and fantasy in most based on a true incident movies. Marguerite de Courreges, Comer, claims that she was raped by her husband Jean's friend and squire Jacques Legris in the film. To prove her claim true, Matt Damon's Jean challenges Legris to trial by combat. Of course, the movie is about much more than just the duel, as is the true story, so here's what went down. The movie does follow the true story rather closely, and with a runtime of 2.5 hours, we'd hope so. The events leading to the duel were described at great length in Jean Froissart's Chronicles, a prose history of the 100 Years' War written in the 14th century by Jean Froissart, though director Ridley Scott's screenplay was adapted from Eric Jaeger's The Last Duel book. The story is told 3 times, once from each character's point of view, so some events are repeated while others are only told once, as the story is so close to the events of history as they were recorded. Will only specify when those two things diverge, which they don't often do, except in the imaginings Scott and the actors create for the characters' internal lives. On the whole, however, the events follow history. We begin with Jean de Courreges, who after successful war campaigns for the King of France, finds himself falling out of favor with Count Pierre, Ben Affleck. Pierre favors de Courreges' friend Legris, and the friendship between the men begins to deteriorate. De Courreges, whose wife and son died of an unknown illness, eventually marries Marguerite, a wealthy but reputationally damaged young woman. Her father had sided against the king twice, and though to many she would seem unmarriageable, for de Courreges, who desperately needed land, wealth and an heir, she was a good match. He saw the marriage as a chance to get the better of Legris as well, for Legris had been gifted by Pierre a parcel of land previously owned by Marguerite's father. De Courreges sued Pierre for the land and lost, which only put him further on the outs with the count. Meanwhile, Legris continued to rise in Pierre's esteem. In real life, there was another complicating factor. De Courreges bought land and was forced to turn it over to Pierre, blaming Legris for it. But this was not included in the film. What was in the film was the pair's reconciliation, which took place in 1384, in which Legris and de Courreges agreed to put the past behind them, and de Courreges introduced Legris to his wife Marguerite. Soon after, de Courreges went on a campaign to Scotland, and though it was a military failure, he distinguished himself with his courage. In the film, however, Pierre is still dismissive of him, and Legris is still the favorite, which only angered de Courreges more after their so-called reconciliation. Things come to a head when de Courreges goes to Paris and his mother-in-law takes most of, if not all, the servants from the house with her, leaving Marguerite alone. This is when she is surprised by Adam Nagaitis, who asks her to open the door so he can wait, and when she does he reveals that Legris is also there to proclaim his love for Marguerite. She refuses his advances, after which he rapes her. The movie presents two versions of the rape. In Legris' version, her protests have an edge of teasing to them, and hark back to a previous scene in which he chased a woman around the table before having consensual sex, sort of, given the power dynamic at play and the complete lack of agency women have in their world. Even in Legris' version, though, Marguerite's attempts to get away seem less flirtatious and more earnest. In Marguerite's version, which the movie frames as the truth, rather than the truth according to whomever, her protests are loud and clear as she screams for help. When he leaves, he says she should tell no one, especially her husband, because he might kill her if he finds out. When de Courreges returns home, he demands sex, but Marguerite refuses and tells him about the rape, fueling de Courreges' anger against his friend. De Courreges also says that she must have sex with him, as Legris can't be the last person to have known her. Marguerite is, effectively, raped again. As in the film, de Courreges has to first ask Count Pierre for a trial, which is obviously biased in favor of Legris. De Courreges knows that even the king is biased against him, and decides to ask for a trial by duel, in which God decides the outcome by letting the liar die. There is still a trial though, and just as in reality, Marguerite is now pregnant. At the time, it was believed a woman could not conceive if she didn't enjoy sex, and therefore her pregnancy was counted against her. It couldn't be rape if she was pregnant, because she must have enjoyed it. Gross. In the film, it is revealed mid-trial that if de Courrèges loses at the hand of Le Gris, Marguerite will also be killed by being stripped naked, put in an iron collar, and set on fire. Of course, as was likely true in real life as well, no one in the film seemed to care about Marguerite's fate. After all, a crime of rape against a wife was considered a crime against the husband, and a property crime at that, since women were mere objects to be possessed. The film does show that at the same time as Marguerite was pregnant, so was the queen. What it doesn't detail is that while Marguerite gave birth to a healthy boy, the queen's son was sickly and died not long after he was born. While this had no material bearing on the plot, it's an interesting detail given that in the film the queen was often panned to as the sole person to sympathize, however quietly, with Marguerite. In reality, instead of mourning, the king held a series of banquets and parties that culminated in the duel between Le Gris and de Courrèges. Marguerite was forced to watch from a wooden tower on the battlefield, also in view of the many spectators who came to watch, while chained to the floor, awaiting her potential death sentence. If her husband lost, she would be found guilty of perjury. The duel itself was very violent, as it was in the film. It's long and gory and ends with de Courrèges stabbing Le Gris through the mouth. In real life, it was the throat, proving Marguerite to have been telling the truth. They leave, with the crowds cheering for de Courrèges. The film shows Le Gris stripped and hanged by the ankle in the town square. The movie ends with Marguerite playing with her son, seemingly at peace with her life. There is a brief coda that reveals Marguerite outlived her husband and never remarried.